Alexandra, it's been a while. I'm getting married. I need $3,500 for the venue deposit. Please send it. A message from my sister after 5 years of silence. Hoping it wasn't bad news, I opened the message, only to be met with words so brazen they defied imagination. I felt not so much anger as stunned disbelief. I almost laughed. After 5 years of silence, that's the first thing you say? I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and replied with nothing but cold facts. Congratulations on your wedding, but I can't send money. As independent adults, you need to resolve this on your own. The moment I hit send, I felt certain I'd made the right choice. To them, though, that was the signal to declare war. My name is Alexandra. I'm 28 years old. I run a graphic design studio in Portland, Oregon, on my own. I have good clients, trustworthy friends, and I buy what I want with money I've earned. Since I left that house 5 years ago, I've finally been living a peaceful life I cherished. Until that awful notification made my phone vibrate. That afternoon, I was completely absorbed in designing a client's logo. The silence was broken by the brief vibration of my phone in my pocket. Seeing the name Christina on the screen made my heart jump unpleasantly. Only minutes after I refused to send $3,500, my phone exploded with calls and messages from relatives. And then, like a final blow, a joint message from my parents. If you can't even celebrate Christina, then pay up. If you won't give a wedding gift, you are no longer part of this family from this moment on. This isn't just a demand for money. Something much bigger and more deeply rooted is at play. This is no longer a family argument. This is about defending the dignity of my life. The more their hysterical reactions poured in, the colder and clearer my mind became. They were panicking. Not just a little. Unhinged, practically. Why would declining a $3,500 request send the whole family into such a meltdown? Their scramble made it look as if they'd never imagined I would say no. As if they'd been absolutely certain I couldn't refuse. At that moment, something I had shoved deep into my memory began to surface slowly, like debris rising through murky water. It was the second year I'd lived in Portland, when my business was finally gaining traction and the dream of having my own studio was starting to feel real. My mother called me, for the first time in a long while, with a small, weak voice. Your father's chronic illness has worsened. He might need emergency surgery. Could you help? Just a little, in case something happens? I was torn between the success I was finally holding on to and the nagging guilt of having left my family behind. My mother's repeated thank you and you're the only one I can count on the phone moved me. All right, but it gets hard to wire money every time. Why don't we open an account? An emergency fund for the family. I'll put in a little each month and it can be used only when things are truly bad. That was my proposal. I truly thought it was for the best, offered entirely out of genuine goodwill. I went to a local bank, opened a joint account, and sent the cash card to my parents' house. After that, I threw myself into chasing my dream. Late-night design sessions, weekends spent preparing for competitions. My head was always full of work. To be honest, I almost forgot the account existed. It was supposed to be for emergencies, so I assumed it wouldn't be touched much. Maybe deep down, I still wanted to believe in my family. But now, what was unfolding before my eyes was something entirely different. Their unhinged fury, my sister's brazen demand, and the account of goodwill that had resurfaced from the depths of my memory. All the dots were finally connecting into the worst possible picture. No way! A bad feeling crawled up my spine. I grabbed my coat and called one person. She would shine the light of the law on this chaos. Victoria, it's Alexandra. Sorry to be so sudden. Can I come to your office right now? I waited for the calm voice of my friend and the most trusted lawyer I knew in this city. I swore to myself that if my goodwill had been trampled, they would pay every cent of the price, down to the last penny. Victoria Jones, my only and greatest weapon. She'd been a friend since college and is now one of Portland's top corporate attorneys. Visiting her office was usually about business advice. Never did I imagine I'd be knocking on her door over a family matter. As soon as I stepped inside, Victoria saw my face and immediately sensed something was wrong. I'll make some coffee. First, just calm down, she said, her voice as steady as ever. Holding a warm mug, I told her everything in a trembling voice. The message from my sister after 5 years, the audacious demand for $3,500, and the family's coordinated declaration of disownment. Finally, I told her about the joint account I had opened 3 years ago out of pure goodwill, a detail I had almost forgotten myself. Victoria listened quietly, never interrupting, simply nodding as I spoke. When I finished, she looked at me with steady, unwavering eyes and said, "Alexandra, thank you for telling me everything. You have done nothing wrong. This isn't a personal matter of feelings. This is a clear case of asset misuse. We will handle this as a legal issue calmly and methodically." Her words were a lifeline. She opened her laptop and faced me again. "Listen, here's what we'll do first. Verify the facts. Put emotions aside for now. Start by giving me the joint account information, bank name, account number, and your ID details. If you can access it online, that's the fastest way." I pulled out a copy of the old passbook and my ID from my bag. Victoria's fingers flew across the keyboard with astonishing speed. Login screen, password, two-factor authentication. Each step felt like opening a new layer of hell. Finally, the account's main page appeared. "I see," Victoria muttered softly, yet sharply. The balance on the screen was just a few $dozen. She gave me a look, then silently clicked the transaction history tab. What appeared before me was a horrifying reality far beyond anything I could have imagined or considered reasonable. The moment the transaction history page loaded, I was speechless. It was filled with an overwhelming number of withdrawals. Most were not the unavoidable expenses I had envisioned, like emergency medical bills. The majority of the transactions took place around the city where my sister, Christina, lived. Thousands of dollars spent at high-end boutiques, purchases of designer handbags and jewelry, payments for what seemed like weekend resort getaways, and dinners at trendy, upscale restaurants featured on social media. It was a dazzling record of consumption, as if she were living the life of a single aristocrat in luxury. I felt nausea more than anger. Money I had earned through sleepless nights, meeting impossible client demands, my hard-won rewards, squandered on my sister's vanity and luxury. But the nightmare didn't end there. Tracing further back, I found regular, high-value withdrawals from my parents' local area. The money went to multiple credit card companies and loan providers I had never even heard of. Victoria analyzed the flow calmly and delivered the harsh truth. "Alexandra, listen carefully. Your parents have hidden debts, substantial ones, possibly failed business ventures or a mortgage. They've been secretly using your Goodwill account to cover their financial mess." I felt completely lost. I had trusted my family and even set up a dedicated account for emergencies, and yet, out of busyness and naivety, I had failed to monitor it. I was furious at myself. The shock hit like a blunt instrument. What had the family I trusted truly been? Then Victoria pointed to a particularly large sequence of withdrawals from the past few weeks. Payments to the city's most luxurious wedding venues, renowned catering companies, and bespoke wedding dress shops. The true meaning behind my sister's $3,500 demand became horrifyingly clear. That request was only the tip of the iceberg of her planned extravagance. The account details on screen told the story of the lavish wedding party that was already underway, mocking me silently. "Wait, Victoria, this date." I pointed at the screen. The large venue deposit had been paid just a few days before Christina sent her message asking for $3,500. She had already spent the money and contacted me only to cover it. The audacity, the planning, the contempt for my goodwill, it froze me to the bone. Victoria downloaded all the transactions and compiled them into an Excel sheet, working quickly and methodically. Minutes later, she leaned back, exhaled deeply, and looked at me with eyes that held both professional sternness and a flicker of sympathy. "Alexandra, are you ready?" I nodded silently, but the final figure Victoria revealed shattered my naive assumptions with effortless precision. Over the past 3 years, the total amount illicitly withdrawn from this account is $112,000. The weight of that number crushed me. More money than I had ever invested in my own future had vanished like bubbles, spent on their greed and vanity without my knowledge. In the face of that reality, feelings of sadness or shock quietly faded from my heart. In their place, a calm, icy anger began to rise. Slowly, but unmistakably, from the very depths of my soul. This was no longer a family financial dispute. This was a major theft of my life itself. So, what do you want to do, Alexandra? Walking back from the office, Victoria asked me quietly, not, what do you want me to do, but what do you want? I stopped and looked up at the Portland evening sky. Victoria, I'm not trying to sue them. I just want them to understand, down to their very bones, how costly it is to trample on someone's goodwill, and that I am no longer their ATM. Hearing my words, Victoria nodded firmly. Understood. We'll make sure your message is delivered in the strongest possible way. Back at the studio, we approached it like a corporate strategy meeting, outlining an action plan. Phase 1, stop the bleeding. Prevent any further outflow of my assets. Phase 2, notify the facts. Legally communicate the extent of what we know. Phase 3, present the options. Force them to face the consequences of their wrongdoing. This was, I reminded myself, a highly intelligent negotiation to reclaim control of my life. That very night, Phase 1, stop the bleeding, was quietly but swiftly executed. Following Victoria's instructions, I called the bank's customer service. I need to place an emergency freeze on this joint account. There is a serious suspicion of misuse by one of the account holders. A lawyer is present and we are conducting an investigation. Please stop all transactions immediately to prevent further losses. The moment the word lawyer was mentioned, the representative's tone shifted noticeably. The call lasted only 15 minutes. The family's cash cow had in that instant been completely cut off at the root. But our stop the bleeding operation wasn't finished. Victoria had discovered that my parents had also used my personal information to sign up for several services without my consent. This is outright fraud, Alexandra, she said. We contacted every service provider one by one. Again, the presence of a lawyer carried enormous weight. These contracts were entered without the account holder's consent and are deemed unauthorized. They will be terminated immediately, and any outstanding charges will be transferred to the responsible parties. Your parents. By the time the calls were done, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if all the stagnant poison inside me had been drained. The bleeding had stopped. They could no longer touch a single penny of my money. Next came Phase 2. It was time to show them the weight of their crimes, reflected in the clear mirror of the law. The following day, we moved into Phase 2, notifying the facts. Victoria prepared a formal notice on heavy, embossed letterhead bearing her law firm's logo. At the top, it boldly declared that Victoria was fully authorized to act on my behalf. It precisely listed the total amount unlawfully withdrawn, $112,000 down to the last cent. It also included a list of the fraudulent service contracts signed in my name, along with a calm legal assessment of why these constituted fraud. The document concluded with a firm statement. Please contact my office within 7 days of receipt. Failure to respond within this period will leave us no choice but to consider civil and criminal legal action. This was the final warning. Negotiate at the table or face court. We sent it via certified express mail. By now, they were probably receiving that cold, factual sheet and simultaneously realizing the severity of their situation as accounts were frozen and services canceled. 3 days had passed since the notice was sent. My phone remained eerily silent, but Victoria's office was flooded with calls. As expected, the first call came from my mother. Put me through to Alexandra. How dare she send such a terrifying letter? What on earth is she thinking? There were no apologies, no reflection, only insults directed at me for hiring a lawyer and selfish demands. Next came Christina. She reportedly sobbed, begging for forgiveness. I didn't mean to make you angry. The dress and the venue got canceled. Please, tell my sister to help me just this once. But her tears were not for the weight of the wrongdoing she had committed. They were merely self-pity over her shattered dreams. Finally, the day before the notice deadline, my father called Victoria formally. She's right. We were entirely wrong. May we meet to discuss this? His voice, for the first time, carried the weight of someone who truly understood the gravity of the situation. Victoria agreed, under conditions. Mother and sister would not attend. The time and place were set by us, and this would be a negotiation, not an emotional appeal. The meeting with my father was scheduled 3 days later, in Victoria's office conference room. This was not a family reunion. It was the formal first negotiation between creditor and debtor. On the appointed day, I waited at the conference table for my father. When he entered, I was struck speechless. he looked smaller, frailer, and far older than the last time I had seen him. He sat across from Victoria and me like a defendant in a courtroom, hesitantly and awkwardly. Victoria opened the conversation first. "We are here today to discuss a repayment plan for $112,000. First, do you dispute any of the facts outlined in our notice?" My father's voice trembled as he barely managed to say, "No, I don't dispute anything." Then he apologized deeply. Deeply. "Alexandra, I'm truly sorry. I did an unforgivable thing to you. I have no words to make it right." I simply watched him in silence. Perhaps his apology was sincere, but my heart no longer stirred even an inch. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice cold and flat, even surprising myself. He looked up and spoke haltingly, recounting failed retirement fund investments, guarantees on friends' loans, and the mounting costs of vanity and lifestyle. He admitted that, knowing I was successful, they did not rejoice but instead grew jealous, relying on my money to mask their own misery. I interrupted his confession calmly but firmly. "Father, I didn't come here to hear apologies or reminisce about the past. As Victoria said, I came to hear a repayment plan. Show me your sincerity with concrete numbers. If you can't, we move to the next step." At my words, my father looked up, startled. The person before him was no longer the compliant daughter he once knew. Before him stood a single, unyielding creditor. Me, asserting my rights with cold precision. The financial documents he produced were dismal. Full repayment at once was impossible. In a strained voice, he begged for installments, but Victoria remained expressionless. She pulled out a prepared legal document and slid it across the table. "Installment repayment is anticipated. However, certain conditions must be met." The document was titled Acknowledgement of Debt and Repayment Agreement. Victoria read each clause to him. Article 1, the debtors, father, mother, and sister Christina, jointly acknowledge their obligation to repay Alexandra $112,000. Article 2, repayment must be made monthly in the specified amount by the specified date to the designated account. Article 3, any missed payment results in the immediate loss of installment privileges, allowing for full repayment and enforcement actions, including wage garnishment and asset seizure. Article 4, this contract holds full legal force as a notarized document. This was no mere family promise. If they broke it, I could seize their assets immediately, without court approval. A strict, binding legal contract. My father stared at the contract in stunned silence. There was no room left for familial leniency. "Do you accept these terms, or shall we reveal all the facts in court?" Victoria's final question hung heavily in the quiet room. My father had no choice. He nodded weakly, gripping the pen Victoria offered with trembling hands. "I understand. I accept these terms." He signed the contract. When all was finished, he whispered almost to himself, "Alexandra, I'm truly sorry. And, despite all this, take care of yourself." Those were his last words to me. When he left the room, a heavy silence settled over us. "Was this the right thing to do?" Victoria asked gently, peering at me. I exhaled slowly and nodded. Yes, it was the right thing. There was no triumphant joy, no satisfaction of revenge in my heart. Only the strange emptiness and quiet relief of completing a massive project. I hadn't forgiven them. But I refused to waste my life's energy holding on to hatred. This legal contract was a single, unbreachable boundary drawn between them and me. They could no longer intrude on my life, and I would no longer involve myself in theirs. This was not reconciliation. This was a cold yet necessary form of coexistence, an arrangement in which neither of us would interfere in the other's life, the only solution possible for us. "Good work, Alexandra," Victoria said, gently patting my shoulder. The warmth softened my frozen heart, if only slightly. The agreement with my father was honored without incident. Every month, the agreed-upon amount was transferred into my account by all three debtors. It was strictly a business-like fulfillment of obligation. I have no detailed knowledge of how they lived afterward, only occasional fragments of rumor from distant relatives. Christina's wedding was canceled. My parents, unable to repay their debts, filed for bankruptcy. My father, having set aside his pride, reportedly works as a security guard, and my mother has started a part-time job at a local supermarket. And the greatest change was in my sister, Christina. Now, Christina lives alone in a small apartment. By day, she works at a cafe. By night, she studies desperately at an online web design school. Hearing this, my heart did not stir. There was only a quiet awareness. This was the story of people I no longer knew. Meanwhile, my own life had undergone a profound shift. That incident left me with scars deeper than any financial loss. It had instilled in me a fear of trusting others. I realized I couldn't stay like this. I needed to face my own heart seriously, to understand myself again. With that resolve, I sought out a therapist Victoria had recommended and knocked on her door. The therapy sessions felt like a quiet journey, a time to discover a new version of myself. Through our conversations, I gradually began to understand the root of the problems I had been carrying. What I had truly feared was becoming like my former self, unable to set healthy boundaries, allowing others to depend on me or exploit me. True kindness isn't about agreeing to every demand. Sometimes, for the sake of the other person's independence, you must have the courage to say no. That was the first step toward building honest relationships, for both parties. With each session, I felt the hard, frozen parts of my heart slowly thawing. I realized I didn't need to work frantically to reclaim the $112,000 I had lost, because through that ordeal, I had gained something far more valuable than money. It was a quiet yet unshakable confidence that I would never hand over the steering wheel of my own life to anyone. Even now, their monthly transfers continue to arrive on the same day each month. They are the only proof that that dreadful incident was not a nightmare of the past, but an undeniable reality. The other day, while having dinner with Victoria, she asked me quietly, "Hey, Alexandra, if by some chance they ever repay the full amount, would you see them again?" I paused briefly, then shook my head calmly and firmly. "No, never again." At my answer, Victoria smiled gently. "I see. That's the answer you've chosen." Yes, that is my answer. Forgiving them and letting them back into my life are entirely separate matters. I chose to settle the past and move forward into the future. They too must build their own future on their own. The sky over Portland is wide and clear today, and I know my future can be just like it. Free, limitless, and full of possibility. I believe that with all my heart.